I'm going to demonstrate how you can connect a Patch Logic schematic with a Patch Professional Layout. So first of all, we want to generate a layout netlist from Patch Logic. In this case, it will be called completed, and I'm going to override an existing one. So hitting OK, it says, OK, do you want to override the existing netlist? Yes. So we will transform this particular netlist into key netlist, which can be loaded into Patch Professional Layout. So before we can perform that, we need to create a Patch Professional Layout project using the job management visitor. So in this case, we are going to generate a new project in the location projects GPS dongle, which is currently an empty folder, as you can see here. So we're going to call this GPS dongle as a project and say next to create that particular file. So we need to point to a central library that we are going to use with this project. In this case, this particular central library. It's going to ask us if we want to associate now a foreign netlist with this particular project. We're going to hit no because we are using our automation to link that with that particular project. The next step is to associate or create a project based on a template. That can be either a PCB template or with a flex template. In this case, we are choosing a 4-layer template that is defined in our central library to create this particular PCB project. So the content for Patch Professional Layout is being generated, so we can now double click this PCB folder to open Patch Professional Layout or start Patch Professional Layout standalone and use the file open to open this particular project. Since the template was built on an earlier version of Patch Professional Layout, I'm getting this particular error message or warning message that we need to upgrade our ICDB database structure based on a VX 2.10 release. Notice that the project is empty and we only have a net 0 and we don't have any components loaded yet. So since we have defined our netlister in our working directory, we've got an additional menu within our Patch Professional Layout to call up the netlister for. Since it's the first time that it doesn't recognize a configuration file, it will create this particular configuration file within the netlist mappings files subdirectory of our project. The first thing what we are going to do is we are going to browse for our created ASCII file from Patch Logic, the layout netlist. And we are going to state in this case what kind of netlist it is, what kind of format we are going to utilize. In this case Patch Logic, but you notice that there are several other netlists that we can transform into a key netlist. So reading the netlist file format, we notice that there are currently 30 components having a reference designator, and there are currently 7 missing since it's not able to detect the part name that's being used with the same naming from our central library. So we need to map that information from the missing parts in our design to the central library information. So in this case, we have a capacitor in an 1005 package, so we can associate that with the belonging information. We can save this file into a dedicated kind of mapping file which we can reuse over and over again. So in this case, for customer XYZ, I'm using this particular part number, and I'm going to save this for that information so that I don't need to do that mapping again the next time that I'm doing a job for this particular customer. So in this case, the 1608, we want to associate to this particular component, and we continue. You can filter on partition to look for particular components, in this case in the resistors, so the 005 again with this particular 0402. So I will quickly finish my mappings for this particular components. So when we are done performing our mapping, we can generate a so-called mapped record set. This mapped record set can then be used to create a so-called key and netlist. So in this case, we see the notice that we need to forward annotate the key and netlist in our PCB. So to perform that, we go to the Xpedition Layout and we go to Project Integration, and we do a forward annotation of that key and netlist to update that information and retrieving all the central library information, like path information, and bring in the netlist. And on that particular moment, you will notice that we have the unplaced components in our component explorer and the netlist information within our netlist section. So I can start saying, okay, I'm going to drag and drop the information within our PCB design. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to quickly pre-place this particular PCB using the 3D functionality. So when we are done placing our initial placement, we can focus further on the Netlist Converter. We can perform a compare between our loaded netlist and the content from the PCB. Notice that we've got a warning called net class change, and we need to read the log file for more details. So looking at the log file with more details, we see that we need to define several classes and associate those particular nets to those net classes. So performing that particular action, we will go to center the constraints manager, and we are going to define. So within the schemes, the master scheme, we are going to create a new net class called data. So saving this information within the database, we can perform again a compare to see, and now currently no changes has been found. Okay, so now there are no changes between Patch Logic and Patch Layout. Let's make some changes within Patch Logic and forward annotate these to Patch Professional Layout. So within the configuration setting, we can perform several steps that we've previously done manually automatic. So we will automatically update the new netlist. We will auto-load the mapping files that we created, if it does exist. During the create record set, we will auto-save all the mappings. We auto-run an ECO compare, and we auto-run a key and netlist. And we will automatically perform a forward annotation within Patch Professional Layout. So going to path logic, I will copy some existing components and I will add a connection. That particular connection I'm going to call ABC. And I will create a new class, also called ABC, and add the particular newly created net into this ABC class. I'm going to save the design, and what I'm going to do is I will perform a layout netlist from this logic in the existing location within my legacy, and I will perform an override again on this particular path layout netlist. Going back to Path Professional, we will open the netlist form, which will detect automatically the newly updated ASCII file. It will perform a copy into our project directory, and it will list us that the ref discount has been increased from 30 to 32. We still are having those 7 missing parts into the central library due to the fact by default they are not aligned with the naming between part number and the part types being used in the design. But it will automatically load the mappings, and you will notice that we can perform an override on reference designator or on pins. So for example, within the design we've got C7, which is currently an 0603. Let's make that a smaller one by performing an override within the netlist. So we can filter on C7, say okay, we want to override this C7 with a smaller one, in this case an 0402. We save this particular mapping file. Since it's related to the project, it will be stored within the project folder. We can do the same for Q2, and to make this more easy to see, we're going to override the pin mappings that currently exist of Q2 with using the Netlist Converter. So we will focus again on Q2, so perform a filter, and while I'm performing a double click, it will open the part as well directly from the central library and displays me the particular information, so that I can see, okay, what are the pin names used within the central library and what are the pin strings, and can perform an override. So in this case I will say, okay, Q2 needs to be pin 1 within the netlist needs to become 3 because it needs to be mapped to the drain. I will add that particular map. I can perform again a Q2 that needs to be mapped, for example, to the gate, so that will become 1. And pin 3 so now when I'm creating a map record set, it will automatically create the key netlist, it will automatically perform the ECO, and it will automatically create a forward annotation. We notice that the RUSNets has changed. In this case for Q2, due to the override, we've got those 2 additional resistors with the net ABC and we have an override on C7, which is currently in 0402, which was in 0603. So going back, all is done. Then let's the log file. For looking at the log file, we notice that there's a new net, and which is also within a new class called ABC. So we need to modify. So if I'm doing compare again manually, we notice that we are getting again that warning that the net class has changed. So going back to the Patch Professional Constraints Manager, I will add new net class called ABC, and I will assign a net to this ABC called ABC to the net class ABC. And now if I'm doing a compare again, we will notice that there are no changes found, which completes the demo.